Hi, Dr. Humphrey. This is my mind map on empathy, which I'm sure you have. And this is really kind of hard. The article is Shielding Yourself from the Perils of Empathy, how an interpreter can protect themselves while they are interpreting for a deaf consumer who, in various situations that may be painful or discussing traumatic material. And we, as interpreters, we bear witness to a deaf person's pain, and in interpreting situations that pain could be stemmed from oppression, where a deaf consumer is being oppressed by a hearing person or another person. And oftentimes hearing people really are not aware that they're discriminating or oppressing a deaf person. Sometimes it's just due from ignorance, that the hearing community just not aware of deafness, deaf culture, and do things out of ignorance rather than out of malice or spite. So when interpreters view a situation like that, often we're taught that we're supposed to be neutral, and yes, we can act neutral, but that neutrality is not an emotional neutrality. We're human beings, so oftentimes we react internally, have an emotional reaction to it, and that is normal. It's a normal response to an abnormal situation, especially with people that we care about, and so that's a normal response. There's extremes when there's a situation where an interpreter is interpreting and oppression or discrimination is happening. There's a contrasting extreme of affects that happen sometimes, not all the time, where the deaf person just is sort of, when a discriminating remark or is toward a deaf person, they don't really react to it because it's norm to them. That happens to them often, so they sort of have this flat affect, or oh, this happens all the time, whereas the interpreter is like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. There's an emotional response from the interpreter. So it's just that interpreters see that contrasting extreme of affect. Sometimes what happens is that in an interpreting situation, a deaf person's feelings can be projected onto the interpreter, and it's not done on purpose, and the interpreter doesn't necessarily know that they're taking on the deaf person's pain. It seems to happen. And sometimes it happens when the interpreter is interpreting something and their own stuff gets triggered. And so their mind is going and they're building this imaginary thing that's going on, which makes it worse. Or, it's that baggage that the interpreter is carrying that causes them to accept that the feeling that the deaf person is projecting onto the hearing person. And that can be a real problem because that can spiral. The more the interpreter identifies with that pain, the more the interpreter may spiral into an emotional reaction, sort of like vicarious trauma. There's a dual nature to empathy. There's a part, the emotional part, that says, I feel your pain, I understand where you're coming from, I can identify with it. And then there's another part, which is the cognitive, which we're supposed to disengage when it gets to be too much so that we can keep our own sense of self. And when we don't do that, when we gear more to we become more engrossed emotionally, some of the things that can happen is that we can drown in the emotional fallout of that interpreting event. If it continues, if the emotional stuff that's triggered within the interpreter is not dealt with, by talking with someone else, or just getting it out, writing about it, or somehow getting that emotional trigger or emotional response taken care of, then that can lead to depression, withdrawal, um, a just a withdrawal from family and friends, until the interpreter can get that emotional response resolved. On the other hand, too much cognition can really disengage the interpreter also, where there's always this shield up, where they can't make a connection with the deaf person to be able to do an effective interpreting, um, to be effective in their interpreting for that client at the time. And not only are they protective of deaf people in interpreting situations, but they become disengaged with people altogether, thinking that the world really is a bad place, and that the interpreter must protect themselves at all times and at all costs, and so they can't have healthy relationships with people in general. So it's important for the interpreter to realize that there needs to be a healthy balance, that you can identify with your deaf consumer, but also know that I am my own person, and that is your stuff. And yeah, I understand and I can empathize, but that's not who I am, and I don't have to take that on. And also understand when the interpreter themselves are becoming emotional, or that they have a reaction to an interpretive event, that it's really okay to go and talk with someone, that you know not to tell names and things like that. I think most professional interpreters know that, but just to get it out and talk about it, and to get an objective perspective, and to let it go. That pain has a beginning and an end, and that interpreters can work through the trauma that is experienced by the deaf consumer and also by the interpreter, and to know that healthy balance and to be able to disengage. And that's when it can be a win-win situation, where both it's a healthy interpreted event. The deaf person is been given a good interpreted event, and then the interpreter can feel um, healthy and not carrying around somebody else's stuff. I hope that was okay. That was kind of hard. Thank you.